In the misty heart of Oxford, a brilliant cryptographer lies strangled in his locked study. A cryptic code, 3K7P-9R2T-1M8Q-4F6L, etched on his desk, and a clock frozen at 9:17. Enter Hercule Poirot, whose razor-sharp mind unravels a web of deceit spun by a rival scholar, an ambitious student, and a timid librarian. A peacock scarf, a hidden clockwork timer, and a trail of brass cogs lead to a chilling truth. Who broke the unbreakable lock? What secret did the cipher guard? Step into the Clockwork Cipher, where every tick conceals a deadly secret. Chapter 1. The Locked Study. The October mist draped itself over Oxford's ancient spires, curling through the narrow lanes like a conspirator's whisper. Hercule Poirot, bundled in a meticulously tailored overcoat, stepped from the hired car onto the damp cobblestones of St. Giles Street. His polished shoes caught the flicker of gas lights, and his moustache, waxed to precision, quivered slightly in the chill air. The summons had arrived that morning, scrawled in the hurried hand of Inspector Japp, who had been dispatched to Oxford to assist the local constabulary. "A murder, Poirot," the note had read, "and a queer one. Locked room, cryptic code, and a dead cryptographer. Come at once." Poirot adjusted his hat, its brim angled just so, and followed Constable Reed, a lanky young man with a nervous gait, toward a Georgian house nestled between ivy-clad walls. The house, though grand, wore an air of quiet menace, its windows dark except for a single pane on the second floor, glowing like a watchful eye. The street was silent, save for the distant toll of a college bell marking the hour. 7 o'clock. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged paper, beeswax, and something sharper, almost metallic. Inspector Japp awaited Poirot at the foot of a polished oak staircase, his usually ruddy face pale under the weight of the case. "Good of you to come, Poirot," he said, shaking his hand with a grip that betrayed unease. "It's Professor Alistair Grayson, one of the finest minds in cryptography, found strangled in his study, door locked from the inside, and a blasted code scribbled on his desk. It's a proper mess." Poirot's grey eyes, keen as a hawk's, flickered with interest. "A locked room, mon ami, and a code? This is a challenge worthy of Hercule Poirot. Show me this scene of the crime." They ascended the stairs, the constable trailing behind, his boots squeaking faintly on the wood. The study door, heavy oak with an iron lock, stood ajar now, guarded by another constable who saluted stiffly. Japp pushed it open, revealing a room that seemed frozen in time. Shelves lined with leather-bound tomes stretched to the ceiling, their titles glinting in gold. Treatise on the Polybius Square, Ars Cryptographica, and obscure volumes in Latin and Greek. A mahogany desk dominated the center, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkwell, and a quill pen lying askew, as if dropped. In haste. At the desk sat Professor Grayson, or what remained of him, slumped in a high-backed chair, his face ashen, a silk scarf knotted cruelly around his throat. His eyes, wide and unseeing, stared at the ceiling, and his hands rested limply on the armrests, one clutching a crumpled sheet. Poirot approached, his cane tapping softly on the Persian rug. He studied the body without touching it, noting the scarf's intricate pattern, peacock feathers in emerald and gold, and the faint bruising beneath it. "Strangled, you say?" he murmured, "and with such elegance. This was no crime of passion, Inspector. This was deliberate." Japp nodded, pointing to the desk. "That's not all. Look here." A single sheet of paper lay before the body, its surface marked with a sequence of characters in Grayson's precise hand: 3K, 7P-9, R2T-1M, 8Q-4F6L. The ink was fresh, the strokes bold, as if written in urgency. Poirot leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. A cipher, naturellement. But what does it conceal? A message? A name? He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room. A tall grandfather clock stood against one wall, its pendulum still, its hands frozen at 9:17 p.m. The windows, framed in heavy velvet curtains, were bolted shut, their latches undisturbed. The door's key, Japp confirmed, had been found in Grayson's pocket, and the lock showed no signs of tampering. "No one could have got in or out," Japp said, scratching his chin. "The windows are sealed, the chimneys too narrow, and the door was locked tight when we broke it down. It's as if the killer vanished into thin air." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The impossible, mon ami, is but a trick of the mind. There is always a solution, hidden in the details." He circled the desk, his fingers brushing the wood, and paused at a faint scratch near the cipher, a tiny mark, shaped like a cog, barely visible in the lamplight. "Courier," he muttered. "This mark, it is not accidental." Japp followed his gaze. "What, that scratch? Could be anything. A pen, a paperweight." "No, no," Poirot said, shaking his head. "It is precise, like the work of a craftsman. And this clock—" He gestured to the grandfather clock. "Why does it stop at 9:17? Is it broken, or was it stopped deliberately?" Japp sighed. "You're seeing clues where I see furniture, Poirot, but I'll have the clock checked. Meanwhile, we've got 3 people downstairs who were in the house last night. Grayson hosted a small gathering, colleagues, students, the like. Care to meet them?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mais oui, Inspector. The heart of a crime lies not only in its clues, but in those who surround it. Let us descend and observe these suspects." As they left the study, Poirot cast a final glance at the cipher, the stopped clock, and the silent figure of Grayson. The room seemed to hold its breath, guarding its secrets. "Patience," Poirot whispered to himself. "The little grey cells, they will uncover all." Chapter 2. The suspects assemble. The drawing-room of Professor Alistair Grayson's Georgian house was a study in contrasts, opulent yet sombre, its walls adorned with gilt-framed portraits of stern academics, their eyes seeming to follow the living with silent judgment. A crystal chandelier hung above, casting fractured light across a rosewood table where a silver tea service sat untouched, its contents long cold. The air carried the faint must of old velvet and the sharper tang of nervous anticipation. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small, precise figure almost dwarfed by the room's grandeur, yet his presence commanded attention. His gloved hands rested lightly on his cane, and his grey eyes, sharp as a blade, surveyed the 3 figures seated before him. Inspector Japp, standing by the door, shifted his weight, his notebook open but idle, as if he knew Poirot's method required no interruption. The 3 suspects, for Poirot had already deemed them such in his mind, sat in varying states of unease. Dr. Evelyn Ward, a woman of 40 with angular features and a severe black dress, occupied a high-backed chair, her posture rigid as if carved from oak. Her dark hair was pinned tightly, and her lips, thin and unpainted, were set in a line that suggested both defiance and impatience. Thomas Blake, a lanky graduate student in his early 20s, slumped on a velvet settee, his ink-stained fingers fidgeting with the frayed cuff of his tweed jacket. His eyes, wide and restless, darted toward the door as if contemplating escape. Beside him, Miss Clara Henshaw, the university librarian, perched on the edge of a cushioned stool, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief into knots. Her soft brown hair framed a face pale with distress, and her spectacles magnified eyes that seemed to plead innocence before any accusation was made. Poirot cleared his throat, a delicate sound that nonetheless silenced the room's faint rustlings. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth as polished marble, "we are gathered in the shadow of a tragedy most grave. Professor Alistair Grayson, a man of intellect, lies dead in his study, strangled by a scarf of silk and locked within a room that admits no intruder. Yet an intruder there was, or perhaps one among you." His gaze lingered on each face, noting the flicker of Evelyn's eyelid, the tightening of Blake's jaw, the quiver of Clara's lip. "You were all present last evening, no? At this gathering of minds hosted by the Professor. I wish to hear your accounts, precise and unadorned, of what transpired. But first, permit me to understand you." He turned to Evelyn Ward, his head tilted like a curious bird. "Mademoiselle Ward, pardon, Dr. Ward, you are a cryptographer, oui? A colleague of the late Professor, yet not, I think, a friend." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her voice crisp as frost. "Colleague, yes. Friend? No. Alistair Grayson was a man of outdated ideas, clinging to ciphers that belong in a museum. We disagreed often, publicly, at conferences, and privately here in Oxford. His work on Polybius squares was pedestrian, and he resented my advancements in modular arithmetic. But if you're implying I had reason to kill him, Monsieur Poirot, you're mistaken. I was in this very room until 9:30, discussing his latest paper with others. Ask anyone who was here." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this paper, it was significant." "Significant?" Evelyn's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. It was his attempt to stay relevant. He claimed to have devised a cipher tied to clockwork mechanisms. Some nonsense about gears encoding messages. I told him it was impractical. Espionage requires efficiency, not theatrics. "Yet," Poirot said softly, "he was murdered, and a cipher was left on his desk. Perhaps his ideas were not so impractical. None." He did not wait for her reply, but turned to Thomas Blake, whose hands had stilled, though his knuckles were white. "Monsieur Blake, you are the student of Professor Grayson, are you not? A young man eager to learn the secrets of codes and ciphers?" Blake swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Yes, sir. I've been his student for 2 years. He was brilliant. I came last night to hear about his new work, like everyone else. I couldn't have—" He faltered, his words tripping over themselves. Poirot raised a hand, gentle but firm. "Calm yourself, monsieur. Tell me only what you did, where you were. The truth, it has a way of revealing itself." "I was here," Blake said, his voice steadier now. "In the drawing room, mostly. We had drinks, talked about ciphers. I stepped out around 9 to fetch a book from the library. Grayson asked me to check a reference. I was back by 10, but by then people were leaving and then we heard about the Professor." Poirot's moustache twitched. "You left the house, then returned? Alone?" "Yes," Blake said quickly, too quickly. "It's just down the street. The library, I mean. I wasn't gone long." "And you saw nothing unusual? No one near the study, perhaps?" Blake shook his head, his eyes fixed on the floor. "No, sir. Nothing." Poirot's gaze lingered on the young man's hands, noting a faint smudge of oil on his cuff, nearly invisible against the tweed. He filed the observation away and turned to Clara Henshaw, who flinched as if his attention were a physical touch. "Mademoiselle Henshaw, you are the librarian, oui? A keeper of knowledge, yet you too were at this gathering. Why?" Clara's voice was soft, almost a whisper, but clear. "Professor Grayson requested a manuscript, a rare 17th century text on cipher wheels. I brought it to him at 8 o'clock. He was kind, always encouraging my work. I stayed for the discussion, but I left early, around 9. I was home before anything happened." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained precise. "You are certain of the time, mademoiselle? 9 o'clock is early to depart from such a gathering." I wasn't feeling well," Clara said, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. "The room was warm, and I needed air. I walked home. My landlady can confirm I was there by 9:30. Poirot nodded, his mind already turning over the details. Evelyn's cold precision, Blake's nervous haste, Clara's trembling sincerity. Each had an alibi, yet each seemed to conceal something, a motive, perhaps, or a fear. He stepped back, clasping his hands behind him. "Merci, all of you. Your accounts are most illuminating. But let us speak of this cipher, this 3K7P-9 R2T-1 M8Q-4F6L. Did the professor share its nature with any of you?" Evelyn snorted. "He was secretive to a fault. He mentioned a breakthrough, but gave no details. Typical Grayson, hoarding his ideas like a miser." Blake hesitated, then spoke. "He said it was tied to his clockwork theory. Something about gears aligning to form a key. I didn't understand it fully." Clara shook her head. "He only spoke of the manuscript I brought. He seemed excited, but he didn't explain why." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A cipher tied to clockwork, you say? Most interesting. And this gathering, who else was present?" Japp stepped forward, flipping open his notebook. "Besides these 3, there were 2 others. Dr. Harold Spence, a historian, and Mrs. Margaret Lyle, a patron of the university. Both left before 9, according to the butler, and their alibis check out. Spence was at a lecture hall, seen by dozens, and Mrs. Lyle was at her hotel, confirmed by staff." "Then we focus on those who remained," Poirot said, his voice low. "The study, it was locked, yet the killer entered and left. The scarf, the cipher, the stopped clock at 9:17. These are not accidents. They are clues, pieces of a puzzle. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall assemble them." Evelyn leaned forward, her tone sharp. "You're wasting time, Monsieur Poirot. The police should be searching for an outsider, not harassing us. Grayson had enemies, spies perhaps, or rival scholars abroad." Poirot smiled faintly. "Enemies, yes, but the heart of a crime is often closer than one thinks. Tell me, Dr. Ward, did you ever visit the professor's study last evening?" "Never," she snapped. "I was in this room or the dining hall. Ask the butler." "And you, Monsieur Blake? Did you enter the study, perhaps to deliver this book you fetched?" Blake flushed. "No. I mean, I went to the library, like I said. I didn't go upstairs." "Mademoiselle Henshaw." Poirot's gaze was gentle but piercing. "I brought the manuscript to the study at 8, Clara said. He was alive, working at his desk. I left it with him and returned to the drawing room." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing their words, their gestures, their hesitations. He turned to Japp. "Mon ami, I should like to see the study again. But first, let us speak with this butler. He is, perhaps, the key to the movements of our friends here." Japp led the way to the servants' quarters, where the butler, a stooped man named Mr. Perkins, awaited. His face was lined with fatigue, but his voice was steady. "The gathering began at 7, sir," he told Poirot. "Drinks in the drawing-room, then dinner at 8. Dr. Ward, Mr. Blake, and Miss Henshaw were here, along with Dr. Spence and Mrs. Lyle. The professor went to his study briefly at 8 to meet Miss Henshaw, then rejoined the party. I saw him alive at 8:30, when I served coffee." "And after?" Poirot pressed. "Doctor." "Spence and Mrs. Lyle left shortly before 9. Mr. Blake stepped out around 9, saying he was fetching a book. Miss Henshaw left soon after, looking poorly. Dr. Ward stayed until 9:30, chatting with the professor in the dining hall. I locked the front door at 10, as usual, and retired. It wasn't until this morning that we found him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the study door? It was locked when you found him?" "Yes, sir," Perkins said. "Bolted from the inside. We had to break it down." "Merci, Monsieur Perkins," Poirot said, dismissing him with a nod. As they returned to the drawing-room, Poirot's mind was a whirl of details: the stopped clock, the cipher, the oil on Blake's cuff, the cog-shaped scratch. He glanced at the suspects, still seated, their faces a tableau of tension. "You may go for now," he said, "but remain in Oxford. The truth, it is like a cipher. It requires patience to decode." As the three filed out, Poirot turned to Japp. "The study, Inspector. I must see it again. The answer lies there, in the silence of that locked room." Japp sighed. "You and your hunches, Poirot. Right, let's go." As they climbed the stairs, Poirot's thoughts raced. The cipher was no mere decoration. It was Grayson's final act, a message to his killer or to those who would find him. The clock, stopped at 9:17, was not a coincidence. It was a marker, perhaps, of the moment of death or something more cunning. And the scarf? Why silk? Why peacock feathers? Each detail was a thread in a tapestry, and Poirot's little grey cells were already weaving them together. In the study, he paused at the desk, his fingers brushing the cipher again. "This code," he murmured. "It is the heart of the matter. But it is not enough. We must find the mechanism, the clockwork that binds it all." Japp frowned. "Clockwork? You think that's literal?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, mon ami. Perhaps." The room seemed to close around them, its secrets locked as tightly as the door had been. But Poirot was undeterred. The truth, he knew, was waiting to be found. Chapter 3. The Cryptic. Legacy. The study of Professor Alistair Grayson, bathed in the wan light of a single lamp, seemed to pulse with secrets as Hercule Poirot stood at its centre, his small frame casting a long shadow across the cluttered desk. The air was heavy with the scent of old leather and ink, but there was something else, a faint metallic tang, like the memory of a machine. Inspector Japp hovered near the door, his impatience betrayed by the occasional tap of his foot, while Constable Reed stood sentinel outside, ensuring no curious servants intruded. Poirot's grey eyes, sharp and unyielding, moved methodically over the scene. The professor's lifeless form, the silk scarf with its peacock motif, the cryptic code 3K7P-9 R2T-1M8Q-4F6L, etched in bold strokes on a single sheet, and the grandfather clock, its hands frozen at 9:17 p.m. Poirot approached the desk, his cane resting lightly against his side. He lifted the sheet with gloved fingers, holding it to the light as if it might reveal its meaning through sheer scrutiny. "This cipher, Inspector," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "It is not a random scribble. It is deliberate, a final testament from a man who knew his time was short. But to what end? To accuse, to warn, or to protect?" Japp crossed his arms, his brow furrowed. "You're saying Grayson wrote it as he was dying? That's a stretch, Poirot. Strangled men don't pause to jot down puzzles." "Perhaps not," Poirot conceded, his moustache twitching. "But a man like Grayson, a master of ciphers, would not leave such a mark without purpose. Let us see what else he has left us." Japp handed him a leather-bound notebook, its edges worn from frequent handling. "Found this in the desk drawer," he said. Grayson's notes, pages of diagrams, equations, and ramblings about clockwork. He was obsessed, they say, with tying ciphers to mechanical devices. Thought it could revolutionize espionage. Poirot opened the notebook, his fingers tracing the meticulous script. The pages were filled with sketches of gears, cogs, and intricate wheels, each annotated with cryptic symbols. One diagram depicted a circular device, not unlike a cipher wheel, but with multiple layers of interlocking gears, each marked with letters and numbers. Beside it, Grayson had written, "The key lies in motion. The clock turns. The code reveals." Another page bore a grid, a Polybius square, but altered, its coordinates paired with time intervals. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "This is no ordinary cipher. It is a dance of numbers and time." He turned to the clock, its mahogany case gleaming dully in the lamplight. The hands, still at 9:17, seemed to mock him with their silence. He stepped closer, noting the faint dust on its base, undisturbed except for a single smudge near the pendulum. "Inspector, this clock, it is not merely stopped. It was stopped with intent. Observe the smudge here, as if a hand brushed against it in haste." Japp squinted. "Could be the professor's or a servant's. Clocks need winding, don't they?" "Oui, but this is no ordinary clock," Poirot said. He tapped the case lightly, his ear attuned to the faint echo within. "There is something additional. A mechanism, perhaps, not meant for telling time." He gestured to Constable Reed. "Bring a screwdriver, if you please. We must look inside." Japp raised an eyebrow. "You're going to dismantle it? The locals won't like that, Poirot." "Then they must dislike it," Poirot replied, his tone firm. "The truth doesn't wait for permission." While Reed fetched the tool, Poirot returned to the desk, his attention drawn again to the cipher. "The sequence 3K7P-9R2T-1M8Q-4F6L was unlike any standard Polybius square. The numbers, ranging from 1 to 9, suggested a grid larger than the usual 5x5, and the letters scattered across the alphabet hinted at a substitution or transposition. He recalled Grayson's notebook, the mention of gears aligning to form a key. "If the cipher is tied to clockwork," he mused aloud, "then the numbers may represent positions, the letters their values. But we need the mechanism to unlock it." Reed returned with a small screwdriver, and Poirot, with surprising dexterity for a man so fastidious, opened the clock's rear panel. The inner workings gleamed, brass gears, a coiled spring, and the heavy pendulum. But there was something else. A small foreign device nestled among the cogs. It was a timer, no larger than a pocket watch, with a delicate lever set to engage at a specific interval. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Voilà, Inspector. This is no ordinary clock. This timer. It could be set to trigger an action, perhaps even to lock a door." Japp leaned in, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. You're saying the killer rigged the clock to lock the study after they left? Précisément, Poirot said. The locked room, it is not a mystery of magic, but of mechanics. The killer strangles Grayson, writes the cipher. Or perhaps Grayson writes it himself, in defiance, and then sets this timer to engage the lock as they flee. The door bolts itself, and the key remains in Grayson's pocket, creating the illusion of impossibility. Japp scratched his head. That's devilishly clever, Poirot, but who'd have the know-how to build such a thing? And why leave the cipher? Poirot's gaze returned to the desk, where the tiny cog-shaped scratch caught the light. The cipher. It is the professor's voice from beyond. It points to his killer, or to something they sought. And this scratch. He knelt, examining it closely. It is no accident. It matches the gears in the notebook, and perhaps in the timer. Someone handled a device here, and in their haste left this mark. He stood, brushing his gloves with a faint grimace. We must learn more of Grayson's work, Inspector. This cipher, this clockwork, it is the heart of the matter. Who among our suspects knew of his theories? Who had the skill to manipulate such a device? Japp flipped through his notebook. Evelyn Ward's a cryptographer, sharp as a tack, but she's all about numbers, not machines. Blake, the student, mentioned tinkering with models. Could be he knows gears. Clara Henshaw, though, she's just a librarian. Hard to see her rigging clocks. Do not underestimate, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low. The librarian, she handles manuscripts, yes? Perhaps she knows more of cipher wheels than she admits. And the student, his hands, they bear traces of oil. We must investigate their skills, their motives. Japp nodded, though his expression was dubious. Right, I'll have the boys check into their backgrounds. Meanwhile, what about the scarf? That peacock pattern stands out, doesn't it? Oui, Poirot agreed, his eyes narrowing. It is too distinctive, too personal. We must discover its origin. Was it Grayson's, or did the killer bring it? And if so, why choose such a thing? He paced the room, his steps measured, his mind racing. The cipher, the clock, the scarf, the scratch, each was a piece of a puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. He paused by a bookshelf, noting a slim volume titled Horological Ciphers, The Mechanics of Secrecy. He pulled it out, flipping to a marked page where Grayson had underlined a passage. The rhythm of a clock is a code in itself, each tick a letter, each turn a word. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Grayson, he was a poet of secrets. This book, it confirms his obsession. We must decode his final message. Japp sighed. You're seeing poetry where I see a headache, Poirot. What's next? Next, Poirot said, closing the book with a snap. We speak to those who knew Grayson's work intimately. Dr. Ward, she claims superiority. But perhaps she envied his ideas. Monsieur Blake, he admires yet copies. Mademoiselle Henshaw, she brings manuscripts. Perhaps she saw more than she says. And we must find this scarf's story. It is no mere accessory. As they left the study, Poirot cast a final glance at the desk, the cipher glowing faintly under the lamp. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for him to unravel its truth. Patience, he murmured to himself. The little grey cells, they will find the rhythm of this crime. Outside, the Oxford mist had thickened, cloaking the house in a shroud of mystery. Poirot adjusted his scarf, plain, not peacock-patterned, and stepped into the night, his mind already turning to the next thread in Grayson's cryptic legacy. Chapter 4. The Rival's Motive. The morning sun pierced the Oxford mist, casting pale beams through the leaded windows of the university's cryptology library, a cavernous room where silence reigned as heavily as the dust on ancient tomes. Hercule Poirot navigated its labyrinthine aisles, his cane clicking softly on the wacko, polished floor, his eyes alert for Dr. Evelyn Ward. He found her in a corner office, a stark contrast to the library's Gothic splendor. A utilitarian space with a steel desk, a single chair, and shelves groaning under treatises on modular arithmetic and cipher theory. Evelyn stood at a chalkboard, her hand moving swiftly as she scrawled equations, her black dress absorbing the light like a void. She turned at Poirot's approach, her sharp features tightening with impatience. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice clipped as a telegram. "I expected the police, not a private detective. Have you come to accuse me, or is this merely a social call?" Poirot smiled, his moustache tilting upward. "Neither, Dr. Ward. I come to understand. A man is dead, a cipher left behind, and you, his rival, were among the last to see him alive. Permit me to explore this. Rivalry." Evelyn set down her chalk, dusting her hands with a brisk motion. "Rivalry is an academic's lifeblood, Monsieur Poirot. Grayson and I clashed over ideas, not fists. His obsession with clockwork ciphers was quaint, like a child playing with a wind-up toy. My work, modular systems, algebraic codes, is the future. He couldn't accept that." Poirot tilted his head, his grey eyes studying her as if she were a cipher herself. "And yet, mademoiselle, such clashes can wound deeply. At the symposium last year, did he not attempt to discredit you? A public slight, none?" Evelyn's lips thinned, her fingers tightening on the edge of the desk. "He called my methods mathematical sleight of hand in front of the entire cryptographic society. It was petty, not fatal. I countered with a paper that dismantled his theories. We were even." "Even?" Poirot's voice was soft, but it carried a needle's point. The heart, it does not always keep such tidy accounts. You were at his gathering until 9:30. Oui? Yet no one saw you leave the dining hall after 9. Where were you, precisely?" Evelyn's eyes flickered, but her voice remained steady. "I was discussing Grayson's paper with Mrs. Lyle until she left at 9. Then I lingered in the dining hall, reviewing notes. The butler can confirm I was there when he cleared the table." Poirot nodded, though his expression betrayed nothing. He stepped closer to her desk, his gaze falling on a curious object, a brass model of a cipher wheel, its concentric gears etched with letters and numbers gleaming under the window's light. "This device," he said, pointing with his cane. "It is a clockwork cipher, no? Much like Grayson's work." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "A relic I keep for reference. It's ornamental, not functional. Grayson's ideas were all flash, no substance." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his fingers brushing the wheel's edge. He noted its smooth operation, the faint click of gears aligning. Yet someone used a clockwork mechanism to lock Grayson's study after his death. Mind skilled in such devices, it would seem, was at work. Evelyn's laugh was sharp, like a blade slicing air. "If you're suggesting I built some contraption to murder him, you're as fanciful as he was. I deal in equations, not gears. Besides, I had no reason to kill him. His ideas were no threat to me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No threat, yet you despised him. And this cipher he left. 3K 7P-9 R2T-1M 8Q-4F6L. It is beyond your methods, oui. Did it tempt you, perhaps, to see what he had discovered? I never saw it until Jap showed me this morning, she snapped. It's gibberish, likely a final taunt from a man who loved his secrets too much. If you want a killer, look to someone desperate, someone who needed his work, not someone who surpassed it. Poirot inclined his head, as if conceding the point, though his mind was far from convinced. Merci, Dr. Ward. Your candor is most illuminating. I shall not detain you further, for now. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door, his gaze lingering on a small photograph on her shelf. Evelyn and Grayson, younger, standing together at a conference, their smiles forced. A curious keepsake, he remarked, for one who claims no sentiment. Evelyn's cheeks flushed faintly. A reminder of battles won. Nothing more. Poirot nodded and stepped into the library's main hall, where the scent of old paper enveloped him like a fog. His mind churned, dissecting Evelyn's words. Her alibi was solid, corroborated by the butler, yet her scorn for Grayson was palpable, a motive that simmered beneath her cool exterior. The cipher wheel on her desk, though she dismissed it, suggested a familiarity with clockwork that she downplayed. And the photograph. Why keep such a memento if the rivalry was merely academic? He made his way to the library's exit, where Inspector Japp waited, leaning against a stone pillar, his hat tilted back. Well, Poirot, get anything out of her? She is a woman of precision, Poirot said, but precision can mask passion. She claims no knowledge of the cipher or the clockwork timer, yet her office holds a device much like Grayson's designs. We must verify her movements after 9 o'clock. The butler confirms she was in the dining hall, but did she linger near the study? Japp scribbled a note. I'll have Reed check with the servants again. You think she's hiding something? Everyone hides something, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low. The question is whether it is guilt or merely pride. We must also trace the scarf. Its peacock pattern is too distinctive to be chance. Did it belong to Grayson, or was it brought to the scene? Japp nodded, though his expression was skeptical. You're building a castle out of cogs and scarves, Poirot. What's next? Next, we visit Monsieur Blake, Poirot said, adjusting his gloves. The student, he is nervous, and his hands, they carry the mark of oil. If he tinkers with machines, as he claims, he may know more of clockwork than he admits. As they stepped into the crisp Oxford morning, Poirot's thoughts returned to the cipher. 3K, 7P-1 Orm, R2T-1M, 8Q-4F6L. Its structure gnawed at him, a puzzle that danced just beyond his grasp. The numbers suggested a grid, the letters a substitution, but the clockwork element hinted at a dynamic key, one that shifted with time or motion. Grayson's notebook had spoken of gears aligning. Could the cipher require a physical device to decode? And the scratch on the desk, shaped like a cog, was no mere accident. It was a breadcrumb, left by the killer or the victim, pointing to the truth. The university's spires loomed above, their shadows stretching across the cobblestones. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, weaving connections between the cipher, the clock, and the woman who claimed to scorn them both. Evelyn Ward was a piece of the puzzle, but whether she was the frame or the centre, he could not yet say. Chapter 5. The Student's Secret. The narrow streets of Oxford, slick with the remnants of morning mist, led Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp to a modest lodging house near the university, its faded brick facade sagging under the weight of years. The air was sharp with the scent of coal smoke and damp leaves, and Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly, stepped carefully to avoid a puddle that threatened his polished shoes. Thomas Blake, the graduate student, resided here, in a room that promised to reveal more than his nervous demeanour had in the drawing-room of Grayson's house. Poirot's grey eyes, ever alert, noted the peeling paint on the doorframe and the faint clatter of a typewriter from an upper window. A student's life, he mused, was one of ambition and secrets, and young Blake had both in abundance. Inside, the lodging house was dim, its hallway lined with threadbare rugs and a notice board cluttered with academic flyers. The landlady, a stout woman with a suspicious squint, directed them to Blake's room on the 3rd floor. "He's always tinkering up there," she muttered, "making a racket with his gadgets. Keeps odd hours, that one." Poirot filed her words away, his moustache twitching with interest. The door to Blake's room creaked open under Japp's knock, revealing a cramped space that seemed to burst with the chaos of a restless mind. Books teetered in uneven stacks, their spines cracked from use, advanced cryptography, mechanical principles, and a dog-eared copy of Grayson's own horological ciphers. A narrow bed was pushed against one wall, its blanket askew, while a scarred wooden table bore the brunt of Blake's labours. Gears, springs, and tiny brass cogs spilled across its surface, glinting in the light of a single gas lamp. A faint smell of machine oil hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. Thomas Blake stood in the centre, his lanky frame hunched over a half-assembled device, his ink-stained fingers frozen, mid-motion as he registered his visitors. "Monsieur Blake," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet, "you will pardon our intrusion, but the matter of Professor Grayson's death demands clarity. May we speak?" Blake's eyes, wide and shadowed, darted to the table, then back to Poirot. "Of course," he stammered, setting down a small screwdriver. I told you everything last night. I was at the gathering, then the library. I didn't— Oui, Poirot interrupted, raising a gloved hand. "Your account, it is noted. But it is the details, monsieur, that interest Hercule Poirot. This room, it is a workshop, no? These gears, these tools, they suggest a skill with machines. Tell me, what do you create?" Blake shifted, his hands fidgeting. "Just models, experiments. I'm studying cryptography, but I like building things, cipher wheels, mechanical puzzles. It helps me understand the professor's work." Poirot stepped closer to the table, his cane resting lightly against his side. He picked up a small brass cog, identical in size to the scratch on Grayson's desk, and turned it in the light. "This cog, it is most precise. You have a talent, Monsieur Blake. Did you ever show such creations to Professor Grayson?" Blake's cheeks flushed. "Sometimes." He encouraged it, said my models showed promise. "But I wasn't trying to copy him, if that's what you think." Poirot's gaze fell on Blake's cuff, where the faint smudge of oil, noted the previous night, was joined by a fresher stain. "This oil, monsieur," he said, pointing with his cane. "It was from your work, yes? Yet it was on your cuff last evening, before you claimed to have fetched a book from the library? Curious, non, that a scholar's errand leaves such a mark." Blake's hands twitched, as if resisting the urge to hide his cuffs. I was working on a model earlier that day. The oil must have lingered. I didn't go near the study, I swear." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his smile remained gentle. "You admire the professor, you say. Yet your desk holds a notebook." He gestured to a leather-bound volume, its pages open to equations, mirroring those in Grayson's own notes. These are his methods, are they not? A student's homage or something more? Ambitious? Blake's voice rose, a note of panic creeping in. I was learning from him. He was brilliant, but he didn't share everything. I had to figure things out myself. Those equations, they're practice, not theft. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. He opened the notebook, flipping to a page where a sketch depicted a layered cipher wheel, its gears marked with numbers and letters. A marginal note read, "Alignment at 9:17 yields key." Poirot's moustache quivered. This time, 9:17. It is the same as the stopped clock in Grayson's study. A coincidence, perhaps? Blake paled, his fingers gripping the table's edge. I don't know why I wrote that. It was just a note, something I overheard him say once. He was always talking about time and ciphers. Japp, who had been silent, stepped forward, his notebook open. You said you left the gathering at 9 to fetch a book. The library's a 5-minute walk. You were gone nearly an hour. Care to explain? I got delayed, Blake said quickly. The library was busy, and I had to search for the book. It was a manuscript on cipher wheels. Grayson wanted it for reference. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. And this manuscript, you delivered it to the professor? No, Blake admitted, his shoulders sagging. I couldn't find it. I came back empty-handed. By then, the gathering was breaking up. Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp, who scribbled furiously. The student's story was plausible, yet the oil, the cog, the notebook, all pointed to a deeper involvement. Poirot stepped back, surveying the room. A small wooden box on a shelf caught his eye, its lid engraved with a peacock feather. He opened it, revealing a collection of gears and a folded silk cloth, its pattern unmistakable. Emerald and gold, identical to the scarf around Grayson's neck. Monsieur Blake, Poirot said, holding up the cloth. This scarf, it is most distinctive. Where did you acquire it? Blake's eyes widened, his voice trembling. It's not mine. I mean, it was a gift from a friend. I keep it in the box because it's decorative. I didn't bring it to the professor's house. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A gift, you say? Yet it matches the weapon that ended Grayson's life. A curious coincidence, no? I didn't kill him, Blake cried, his hands clenching into fists. I admired him. I wanted to be like him. Not this. Calm yourself, monsieur, Poirot said, his tone soothing but unyielding. The truth. It reveals itself in time. For now, I thank you for your candor. As they left the lodging-house, Japp muttered, He's hiding something, Poirot. That scarf, the oil, the notebook. It's too much to be chance. Oui, mon ami, Poirot agreed, his eyes distant. But is he a killer, or merely a student caught in a web of his own ambition? The scarf, it is a thread we must follow. Who gave it to him? And this time, 9:17, written in his notes. It echoes the clock. We must learn if the library confirms his absence, and if this manuscript exists. Japp nodded, pulling his hat low. I'll send Reed to the library to check his story. What's your next move? Mademoiselle Henshaw, Poirot said, his voice low. The librarian. She is quiet, but quiet waters run deep. She brought a manuscript to Grayson. Perhaps she knows more of this cipher, or this scarf, than she admits. As they stepped into the street, the Oxford bells tolled noon, their chimes mingling with the rustle of leaves. Poirot's mind was a whirl of details. The oil on Blake's cuff, The cog in his room, the peacock scarf, and the cryptic note about 9:17. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the shape of the whole remained elusive. The cipher, 3K7P-9R2T-1M8Q-4F6L, loomed in his thoughts, its secrets locked in a dance of gears and time. Blake was a key, but whether he turned the lock or merely stood before it, Poirot could not yet say. Chapter 6. The Librarian's Tale. The university library stood like a sentinel at the heart of Oxford, its stone facade weathered by centuries, its arched windows catching the pale afternoon light. Hercule Poirot navigated its steps with measured grace, his cane tapping a steady rhythm, while Inspector Japp trudged beside him, muttering about the damp that clung to his boots. The library's heavy oak doors creaked open, admitting them to a vast hall where the air was thick with the scent of aged vellum and polished wood. Rows of shelves stretched into shadow, their contents whispering of secrets older than the crime at hand. Poirot's grey eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the room, seeking Miss Clara Henshaw, the librarian whose quiet demeanour had piqued his curiosity. They found her at a long reading table, surrounded by stacks of manuscripts, her spectacles glinting as she catalogued a leather-bound volume. Clara was a slight figure, her brown hair pinned loosely, her grey dress blending with the library's muted tones. At their approach she started, her hands fluttering like startled birds, the quill in her fingers dropping to the table with a soft clatter. "Mademoiselle Henshaw," Poirot said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "Forgive this intrusion. We seek only to clarify the events of last evening. You will speak with us, oui?" Clara's eyes, magnified by her spectacles, darted to Japp, then back to Poirot. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've told the inspector everything. But I'll help, however I can." Poirot seated himself across from her, his posture impeccable, his cane resting against the table's edge. "Bon. Let us begin with your visit to Professor Grayson's house. You brought him a manuscript, you said. A 17th-century text on cipher wheels. This was at 8 o'clock, non?" "Yes," Clara nodded, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. "It was a rare volume, De Rotis Cifris, by a Dutch scholar. The professor requested it urgently for his research. I delivered it to his study at 8, stayed for a moment to discuss its contents, then returned to the drawing-room for the gathering." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And the professor? He was well when you saw him? Working, perhaps, on this cipher that now lies on his desk?" "He was at his desk, yes," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "He seemed excited, scribbling notes. He thanked me for the manuscript and said it confirmed something he'd suspected about his clockwork theory. I didn't see the cipher itself, just his usual papers." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gentle but piercing. "You are precise, mademoiselle, about the time. Yet you left the gathering early, at 9 o'clock, claiming illness. The heart, it is not always so exact, no. Perhaps there was another reason for your departure." Clara's cheeks flushed, her hands clenching the manuscript before her. I wasn't feeling well. The room was warm, and the discussion, cryptography, ciphers, it was beyond me. I'm only a librarian, not a scholar like the others. I needed air, so I walked home. My landlady saw me by 9:30. Japp, standing behind Poirot, flipped open his notebook. "That's a quick walk, Miss Henshaw. The lodging house is 10 minutes from Grayson's. You didn't stop anywhere, see anyone?" "No," Clara said, her voice firmer now. I went straight home. I was tired, that's all." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was alert, cataloguing her hesitations. He glanced at the table, where a small brass key lay beside her papers, a key too delicate for a door, perhaps for a drawer or a box. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you admire Professor Grayson, oui? He was kind to you, encouraging your work. Was there perhaps more to this admiration?" Clara's blush deepened, her fingers tightening on the manuscript. "He was kind, yes. He valued my help, even though I'm not an academic. He'd ask for obscure texts, and I'd find them. It meant something to him, and to me. But that's all. I'd never harm him." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. He rose, pacing slowly along the table, his eyes drifting to the shelves behind her. A narrow door, half hidden by a bookcase, caught his attention. A maintenance closet, its handle worn from use. He paused, his cane pointing to it. "This closet, mademoiselle, what does it contain?" Clara blinked, startled. "Just supplies. Paper, ink, cleaning tools. Why?" Poirot did not answer, but gestured to Japp, who opened the door with a creak. Inside, the closet was cramped, filled with brooms, bottles, and a dusty toolbox. But in the corner, glinting in the dim light, was a small brass cog, its edges sharp and precise, identical to the one scratched on Grayson's desk. Poirot knelt, retrieving it with a gloved hand, his eyes gleaming. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "Another cog, here in the library. This is no coincidence." Japp frowned, peering over his shoulder. "What's a gear doing in a closet? You think it's tied to the murder?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, slipping the cog into a handkerchief. "It matches the mark in the study, and the cogs in Monsieur Blake's room. The library, it seems, is not merely a place of books, but of secrets." Clara's voice rose, a note of panic. "I don't know how that got there. I manage the books, not the supplies. Anyone could have left it." "Anyone? Oui," Poirot said, his tone soothing but firm. "Yet you were here last evening, were you not? When Monsieur Blake claims he came to fetch a manuscript. Did you see him?" Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering. I was in the reading room until 9. I didn't see him. The library was quiet. Most students were gone by then." Japp scribbled a note. "So Blake's story about fetching a book doesn't hold up?" "I don't know," Clara said quickly. "He might have come after I left. The night porter could tell you." Poirot's gaze returned to the key on her table. "This key, mademoiselle, it is for what?" Clara's hand moved to cover it, then stopped. "It's for my desk drawer, where I keep personal things. Nothing important." "May I see?" Poirot asked, his voice deceptively mild. Reluctantly, Clara unlocked the drawer, revealing a neat collection of letters, a few photographs, and a small silk pouch. Poirot's eyes sharpened as he glimpsed a folded cloth inside the pouch, emerald and gold, with a peacock feather pattern. "This cloth," he said, lifting it carefully. "It is most striking. A match for the scarf that ended Grayson's life. You have an explanation, perhaps?" Clara's breath caught, her hands trembling. "It's just a handkerchief, a gift from a friend. I've had it for months. I didn't bring it to the professor's house." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A gift, like the one Monsieur Blake claims to have received. Curious how such patterns recur. Merci, mademoiselle, for your time. We shall speak again." As they left the library, Japp muttered, "Another peacock scarf? This is getting ridiculous, Poirot. Everyone's got one, it seems." "Not everyone, mon ami," Poirot said, his eyes distant. "The scarf. It is a thread that binds our suspects. We must discover its source. And this cog in the closet, it suggests the library is more than a backdrop. Did Clara place it there, or was it left to implicate her? And Blake's absence from the library at 9, it undermines his alibi." Japp nodded, pulling his coat tighter against the chill. "I'll have Reed check with the night porter. If Blake wasn't here, where was he? And that key of hers. What's she hiding in that drawer?" "Perhaps nothing," Poirot said. "Or perhaps everything. The librarian, she is timid, but timidity can mask cunning. She knows Grayson's work, his manuscripts. Did she see the cipher? Did she covet it?" They stepped into the street, where the Oxford bells tolled 3, their chimes echoing through the mist. Poirot's mind was a whirl of details. The cog in the closet, the peacock cloth, Clara's nervous precision, and the cipher, 3K7P-9, R2T-1M, 8Q-4F6L, still locked in its mystery. The library had yielded a clue, but it had also deepened the puzzle. Clara Henshaw was a quiet figure, but Poirot knew that silence could conceal the loudest truths. Chapter 7. The Clockwork Clue. The late afternoon light filtered through the study's leaded windows, casting a lattice of shadows across the polished floor of Professor Alistair Grayson's sanctuary. Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the room's disarray, his gloved hands clasped behind him as he surveyed the scene anew. The air was heavy with the lingering scent of ink and wax, undercut by the metallic tang that had haunted his senses since his first visit. Inspector Japp, ever the pragmatist, paced near the door, his boots scuffing the rug, while Constable Reed hovered outside, his youthful face etched with unease. The study, with its towering shelves and cluttered desk, seemed to hold its breath, guarding the secrets of the man who lay slumped in his chair, the peacock-patterned scarf still knotted around his throat. Poirot's grey eyes, sharp as a winter dawn, fixed on the grandfather clock against the wall, its hands frozen at 9:17 p.m., a silent sentinel in the mystery. He approached it, his cane tapping lightly, and ran a gloved finger along its mahogany frame, noting the faint smudge he had observed before. A trace of hurried contact, perhaps. "This clock, Inspector," he said, his voice a soft cadence. "It is more than a timekeeper. It is a witness, and perhaps an accomplice." Japp stopped pacing, his brow creased. "You're still on about that clock, Poirot? It stopped, sure, but clocks fail. What's it got to do with the murder?" "Everything, mon ami," Poirot replied, his moustache twitching. "A clock does not stop at the precise moment of a crime by chance. It was stopped deliberately, and within its gears lies a truth we have yet to uncover." He gestured to Reed. "The screwdriver, Constable, if you please. We shall open this silent witness." Reed produced the tool, and Poirot, with a delicacy that belied his fastidious nature, knelt to undo the clock's rear panel. The screws yielded easily, revealing a labyrinth of brass gears and coiled springs, their gleam dulled by a faint layer of dust. But nestled among them was an anomaly. A small, intricate timer, no larger than a fob watch, its lever poised as if awaiting a command. A tiny cog, identical to those found in Blake's room and the library closet, glinted beside it, caught in a crevice as if dropped in haste. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his eyes alight. "Behold, Inspector, a clockwork timer, not part of the original mechanism. This device, it could be set to engage at a precise moment, perhaps to trigger a lock." Japp leaned closer, his skepticism warring with curiosity. "You're saying the killer rigged the clock to lock the study door after they left. That's clever. Too clever for a spur-of-the-moment murder." "Précisément," Poirot said, carefully extracting the timer with his handkerchief. "This is no crime of passion. It is calculated, a performance of mechanics and deception. The killer strangles Grayson, leaves the cipher, and sets this timer to bolt the door as they flee, creating the illusion of an impossible crime." Japp scratched his chin. "But who'd have the skill for that? Ward's all numbers, not machines. Blake's got the tools and the oil on his cuffs, but he's just a student. And Miss Henshaw, she's a librarian, not a tinkerer." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Do not judge by appearances, mon ami. The librarian handles manuscripts on cipher wheels, devices not unlike this. And Blake, he builds models, oui. But we must also consider the cipher itself." He turned to the desk where the sheet bearing 3K7P-9R2T-1M8Q-4F6L lay under the lamplight, its bold strokes a silent challenge. "This code, it is tied to the clockwork, I am certain. The numbers, they suggest a grid. But the letters, they shift, as gears might shift in alignment." He opened Grayson's notebook, its pages a testament to the professor's obsession with horological ciphers. A sketch caught his eye, a Polybius square, but with a twist, its coordinates linked to the positions of a clock's gears, each turn revealing a new letter. A note beside it that read, "The key turns at the appointed hour." Poirot's fingers paused, his mind racing. The appointed hour, 9:17 perhaps. The cipher, it may require the clock's mechanism to decode. Japp frowned. "You're saying we need to wind the clock to crack the code? That's a bit far-fetched, even for you." "Not wind, Inspector," Poirot said, his voice low. "A line. The timer was set to stop at 9:17, but it may also have aligned the gears to form the cipher's key. We must test this." With Reed's assistance, Poirot carefully examined the timer's settings. The lever, when adjusted, caused a faint click within the clock, as if a hidden gear had shifted. He noted the positions, then turned to the cipher, scribbling a quick grid on a scrap of paper. Using the numbers as coordinates and the clock's gear positions as a key, he tested a sequence, but the result was gibberish. "Non," he muttered. "It is not so simple. The cipher, it requires something more, a specific alignment, perhaps, or another device." Japp sighed. "You're chasing shadows, Poirot. What about the scarf? That peacock pattern keeps turning up. Blake's got one, Henshaw's got one. Could it point to the killer?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes drifting to the scarf around Grayson's neck. "But its presence in multiple hands suggests a common source. Was it a gift, a symbol, or a deliberate plant? We must trace its origin." He stepped back, his gaze returning to the desk, where the cog-shaped scratch gleamed faintly. "And this mark, it matches the cogs we have found. It fell from the killer's device, I think, as they set the timer." Japp nodded, his notebook open. "I'll have the scarf checked. Maybe a local shop sells them. And I'll get the lads to look into Blake's and Henshaw's backgrounds. If either's been tinkering with clocks, we'll find out." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Do so, but also investigate the manuscript Mademoiselle Henshaw brought to Grayson. She claims it was De Rotis Cypheris, but Blake could not find it in the library. Was it truly delivered, or is it a fiction? And the library porter. Did he see Blake at 9, as he claims?" As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused at the door, his gaze lingering on the clock. This timer, Inspector, it is the heart of the deception. Whoever built it had skill, motive, and opportunity. We must look to those who knew Grayson's work, his rival, his student, his librarian. One of them holds the key. Japp grunted. You make it sound like a game, Poirot. But I'll admit that timer's a nasty piece of work. Whoever set it up knew exactly what they were doing. Oui, Poirot said, his voice soft but certain. And that is their mistake, for Hercule Poirot sees what others overlook. They stepped into the corridor, the study's silence closing behind them like a vault. The cipher, the timer, the scarf, the cog, all were threads in a tapestry of murder, and Poirot's little grey cells were weaving them together, inch by meticulous inch. As they descended the stairs, the Oxford bells tolled 4, their chimes a reminder that a time, like the cipher, was both ally and adversary in the unravelling of Grayson's death. Chapter 8. The gathering reconvened. The drawing-room of Professor Alistair Grayson's Georgian house was steeped in an uneasy hush as the evening shadows lengthened across its polished floors. The chandelier above, its crystals dulled by the fading light, cast faint prisms on the walls where portraits of stern scholars seemed to watch with disapproval. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, its embers long cold, his small figure radiating a quiet authority that belied his stature. His gloved hands rested lightly on his cane, and his grey eyes, sharp as cut glass, surveyed the 3 figures seated before him, Dr. Evelyn Ward, Thomas Blake, and Clara Henshaw. Inspector Japp leaned against the doorframe, his notebook tucked under his arm, his expression a mix of skepticism and anticipation. The air was thick with tension, as if the room itself awaited the unravelling of its secrets. Poirot had summoned the suspects back to the scene of the gathering, a deliberate choice to stir their memories or their consciences. The butler, Mr. Perkins, had lit the lamps, casting a warm glow that did little to dispel the chill of suspicion. Evelyn Ward sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her black dress absorbing the light, her angular features set in a mask of impatience. Thomas Blake slouched on the velvet settee, his ink-stained fingers twitching, his eyes darting to the door as if it might offer escape. Clara Henshaw perched on a cushioned stool, her spectacles glinting, her hands clutching a handkerchief as though it were a lifeline. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice smooth and deliberate, we stand in the shadow of a crime most ingenious. Professor Grayson, a man of brilliance, lies dead, strangled by a scarf of peacock silk, locked within his study by a mechanism of clockwork cunning. On his desk, a cipher, 3K7P-9R2T-1M8Q-4F6L, speaks of his final moments. You were here, all of you, on the night he died, and one of you, I believe, holds the key to this mystery. Evelyn's laugh was sharp, cutting through the silence. This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. You drag us back here to play parlour games? I was in the dining hall until 9:30, with witnesses. I had no part in this. Poirot's moustache twitched, his gaze unwavering. Your alibi, Dr. Ward, is noted. Yet your rivalry with Grayson was fierce, non? His Clockwork Cipher? It threatened your own work, perhaps. Threatened? Evelyn's eyes flashed. His ideas were relics, fit for a museum. I had no need to steal them, let alone kill for them. Poirot turned to Blake, whose face had paled. Monsieur Blake, you claim you left at 9 to fetch a manuscript from the library, yet the porter saw no one matching your description. Your hands, they bear the oil of a tinkerer, and your room holds cogs that match the mark on Grayson's desk. You admired him, oui, but admiration can turn to envy." Blake's voice cracked, his hands clenching. "I didn't lie. I went to the library, but it was late, and I couldn't find the book. I came back by 10. I didn't go near the study. I swear it." Clara's voice, soft but trembling, broke in. "I left at 9, Monsieur Poirot. I was unwell. I didn't see the professor after 8, when I brought him the manuscript. I couldn't have done this." Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "Your words, they are like pieces of a cipher, each claiming truth, yet forming no clear message. Let us consider the evidence." He paced slowly, his cane tapping a rhythm. "The scarf, with its peacock feathers, appears in your lives. Blake's box, Henshaw's drawer. A coincidence, perhaps, or a thread that binds you. The cog found in the library and in Blake's room matches the scratch on the desk, and the clock, stopped at 9:17, conceals a timer, a device to lock the door after the killer's escape." Evelyn leaned forward, her tone icy. "You're spinning tales, Poirot. If there's a timer, it proves nothing about me. I don't tinker with clocks." "Perhaps not," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But you know, ciphers, Dr. Ward, and Grayson's work was a challenge to your own. The manuscript, De Rotis Cifris, brought by Mademoiselle Henshaw. Did it inspire jealousy, perhaps?" Clara gasped, her handkerchief twisting. "I only brought what he asked for. I didn't even read it. It was in Latin. I left it with him and went back to the drawing room." Poirot nodded, turning to Blake. "And you, monsieur, your notebook speaks of 9:17. The same hour the clock stopped. Your models, your oil-stained cuffs, they suggest a skill with mechanisms. Did you build the timer to lock the study? To steal Grayson's cipher?" Blake's eyes widened, his voice rising. "No, I was trying to understand his work, not steal it. The note about 9:17, it was something he mentioned in a lecture about gears aligning. I didn't kill him." Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone was relentless. "Then let us turn to the cipher itself." He produced a copy of the code, holding it to the light. 3K, 7P-9R, 2T-1M, 8Q-4F6L. In Grayson's notebook, I found a Polybius square, altered by clockwork principles. The numbers, they are coordinates, but the key, it shifts with the gears. When aligned at 9:17, as the clock suggests, the cipher yields a word. Thief. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Evelyn's lips parted, Blake's hands froze, and Clara's handkerchief fell to her lap. Poirot continued, his voice low and piercing. "Grayson wrote this as he died, or the killer left it as a taunt. It accuses one who sought to steal his work. And you, Monsieur Blake, your ambition, your tinkering, it points to you." Blake leapt to his feet, his face ashen. "I didn't do it. I wanted to learn from him, not take his work. The oil, the cogs, they're from my models, not some murder device." Japp stepped forward, his hand raised. "Easy, lad. Poirot's got a point. That timer didn't build itself, and you're the one with gears all over your room." Clara's voice, barely audible, broke the tension. "It can't be Thomas. He was devoted to the professor. Why would he kill him?" Poirot's eyes flicked to her, noting the tremor in her voice. "Mademoiselle Henshaw, your defense of Monsieur Blake is touching. Yet you, too, had access to the study, to the manuscript that fueled Grayson's cipher, and the peacock cloth in your drawer. How did it come to you?" "It was a gift," Clara whispered, her eyes downcast. "From a colleague. I never used it. I didn't know it matched the scarf. Poirot paced, his mind a whirl of connections. The scarf, the cog, the timer, the cipher, they form a pattern. The killer sought Grayson's work, but something went wrong. In panic or rage, they strangled him, using the scarf at hand. The timer locked the door, and the cipher named the crime. But who among you had the skill, the motive, and the opportunity? Evelyn's voice cut in, cold and precise. You're wasting time, Poirot. If Blake built this timer, arrest him. If not, look elsewhere. Perhaps a spy, someone after Grayson's work for espionage. Poirot's smile was faint. A spy, oui. But the heart of this crime is personal. The scarf, it is too intimate, too specific. And the timer, it required access to the study before the murder. Monsieur Blake, your absence from the library at 9 leaves a gap in your alibi. Where were you? Blake's shoulders slumped, his voice barely audible. I didn't go to the library. I was in the garden, clearing my head. I lied because I didn't want to seem suspicious. Japp's eyes narrowed. The garden? Convenient, with no one to vouch for you. Poirot raised a hand. Enough for now. The truth, it is close, but we need one final piece. Inspector, trace the scarf's origin, its maker, its seller, and verify Mademoiselle Henshaw's departure time with her landlady. Monsieur Blake, your garden story must be checked. As the suspects rose, their faces a mix of fear and defiance, Poirot's gaze lingered on Blake. The student's panic, the oil, the cogs, all pointed to him, yet Poirot sensed a deeper truth. The cipher's word, thief, was a beacon, but whether it named Blake or another, he could not yet say. The room emptied, leaving only the echo of their footsteps and the weight of Grayson's unsolved death. Chapter 9. The Confession. The Oxford evening wrapped the city in a shroud of mist, its tendrils curling around the lamp-posts as Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp stood in the dimly lit parlour of Grayson's Georgian house. The room, once vibrant with the chatter of scholars, now felt oppressive, its heavy curtains drawn against the night. Poirot's small figure stood near the rosewood table, his gloved hands clasped behind him, his grey eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who had unravelled a knot. Japp, beside him, clutched a telegram from the local haberdasher, his face a mix of grim satisfaction and lingering doubt. The three suspects, Dr. Evelyn Ward, Thomas Blake, and Clara Henshaw, had been summoned once more, but only Blake stood before them now, his lanky frame trembling, his ink-stained hands clenched at his sides. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence broken only by the faint tick of a mantel clock, a cruel echo of the stopped grandfather clock upstairs. Poirot's gaze fixed on Blake, his voice soft but unyielding. Monsieur Blake, the time for half-truths is past. The evidence, it speaks clearly, and it points to you. The cipher, the clockwork timer, the scarf, the cog, all converge on a single truth. Will you tell it, or shall Hercule Poirot reveal it for you? Blake's eyes, wide with panic, darted to Japp, then to the floor. I didn't mean for it to happen, he stammered, his voice breaking. I swear I didn't plan to kill him. Japp stepped forward, his hand on his notebook. You're admitting it then? You strangled Grayson? Blake's knees buckled, and he sank onto a chair, his head in his hands. It wasn't supposed to go like that. I only wanted his cipher, the clockwork code. It was brilliant, revolutionary. I thought if I could understand it, maybe even claim a piece of it, I'd make my name. I went to the study after 9, when everyone was distracted. Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes never leaving Blake. "You lied about the library, oui? You were not fetching a manuscript, but creeping to the study, to steal what was not yours." Blake nodded, his voice barely audible. I waited in the garden until the others were in the dining hall. I knew Grayson was working late. He always did after gatherings. I slipped upstairs, using the back stairs to avoid the butler. The study door was unlocked. He was at his desk, writing that cipher, 3K7P-9R-R2T-1M8Q-4F6L. I asked to see it, said I wanted to learn. But he laughed, called me a boy playing at scholarship. He said I'd never grasp it. Poirot's voice was gentle, but relentless. And this rejection, it wounded your pride, no? You saw your ambition slipping away. And so, you acted. Blake's hands trembled, tears streaking his face. He turned back to his desk, dismissing me. I saw the scarf, his scarf, on a chair. I don't know why I picked it up. I was angry, desperate. I wrapped it around his neck and pulled. It was over so fast, he didn't even scream. Japp's face hardened, his hand reaching for his handcuffs. And the locked door. The timer. Blake's voice was a whisper. I'd been working on a timer for my own models, something to mimic Grayson's clockwork ideas. I brought it with me, just in case. After it happened, I panicked. I set the timer to engage the lock, rigged it to the door's bolt. It gave me time to slip out through the servants' entrance before it clicked shut. I thought it would look impossible, like no one could have been there. Poirot nodded, his expression somber. And the cipher? Why leave it? I didn't, Blake said, his voice hoarse. He was writing it when I came in. I think he knew someone was after his work. Maybe he wrote thief to point to me, or to whoever he suspected. I didn't touch it. I was too scared. Japp snorted, snapping the handcuffs on Blake's wrists. Scared, but clever enough to rig a lock and walk away. You're under arrest, lad. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm. Un moment, Inspector. The scarf, Monsieur Blake. Why does it appear in your box, in Mademoiselle Henshaw's drawer? You said it was a gift. Blake's head drooped. It was from Grayson. He gave them out last year, to his students and assistants, as a sort of jest, peacock feathers for his brilliant flock. I kept mine, never used it. I don't know about Clara's. Poirot's eyes gleamed, the final piece clicking into place. So, the scarf was Grayson's own, left in the study, not brought by you. And the cog on the desk, it fell from your timer as you set it, oui? Blake nodded, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean to drop it. I was shaking, trying to get out before anyone came. Japp tightened the cuffs, his voice gruff. You've said enough, Blake. You'll have plenty of time to explain at the station. As Blake was led away, Clara's handkerchief fell to the floor, her face pale with shock. Evelyn stood, her lips tight, her eyes betraying a flicker of relief. Poirot watched them both, his mind still turning over the details. The cipher, naming a thief, had been Grayson's final act, a desperate accusation. The timer, the cog, the oil on Blake's cuffs, all had pointed to the student whose ambition had twisted into murder. Mon ami, Poirot said to Japp as they stepped into the hall, the case is solved, yet the heart aches. A young man, gifted but impatient, destroyed a mentor for a cipher he could not claim. Japp shook his head. Clever, but not clever enough to fool you, Poirot. That timer was a nasty trick, but you saw through it. Poirot's smile was faint, tinged with melancholy. The little grey cells. They see what is hidden. But the cost, Inspector. It is always too high. As they left the house, the Oxford night closed around them, the mist swallowing the echoes of Blake's confession. The cipher's truth had been laid bare, but its shadow lingered, a reminder of genius undone by greed. Chapter 10. The final piece. The Oxford morning was crisp, the mist having retreated to reveal a sky of unyielding grey, as Hercule Poirot sat in Inspector Japp's temporary office at the local police station. The room was a stark affair, its walls bare save for a faded map of the county and a chipped teacup perched precariously on a filing cabinet. Japp, behind a cluttered desk, riffled through a stack of reports, his face etched with the weariness of a case concluded yet not fully settled. Poirot, impeccable in his tailored suit, sipped a cup of tea. Weak by his standards, but accepted with polite grace, his grey eyes distant as if the final threads of the Grayson murder still tugged at his mind. "Blake's locked up, Poirot," Japp said, leaning back in his chair. "His confession's solid. Motive, means, opportunity, all laid out. The timer, the scarf, the cog, it all fits. So why do you look like you've lost a shilling and found a penny?" Poirot set down his cup, his moustache tilting slightly. "The case, mon ami, it is solved, yet the little grey cells, they are restless. The confession of Monsieur Blake, it explains much, but not all. There is a final piece, a detail that completes the picture, and I must be certain." Japp raised an eyebrow, his pen pausing. "What's left to doubt?" He admitted strangling Grayson, rigging the timer to lock the door, dropping the cog. "Even the cipher, thief, points to him. You cracked it yourself with that Clockwork Polybius business." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft but precise. "But the mind of Hercule Poirot does not rest until every shadow is banished. Let us review, to ensure no mistake lingers." He rose, pacing the small room, his cane tapping a measured rhythm. "The cipher, 3K7P-9 R2T-1M8Q-4F6L, when decoded with the clockwork grid aligned at 917, yields thief. Grayson wrote it, I believe, as a dying accusation, knowing his work was coveted. Blake, driven by an ambition, sought to steal this cipher, but was caught. In panic, he used the professor's own scarf, given to him as a token, and strangled him." Japp nodded, flipping open his notebook. "Right. Blake rigged the timer, a clever little gadget he'd been tinkering with, to bolt the door after he slipped out. The cog on the desk fell from it, and the oil on his cuffs betrayed his mechanical work. Case closed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Yet consider, Inspector, the scarf. Blake says it was Grayson's, a gift to his students, found in the study. But Mademoiselle Henshaw also possesses one, as does Blake in his box. Why so many? And the manuscript, De Rotis Cifris, which Clara claims to have delivered. Blake could not find it in the library, and the porter saw no one at 9. Was it truly delivered, or is there another layer?" Japp frowned, his fingers drumming the desk. "You think Clara's involved? She's got no motive, Poirot. She's just a librarian, fond of Grayson but harmless." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone enigmatic. "But let us examine the final clues. The scarf's origin? Have you traced it?" Japp pulled out the telegram from the haberdasher. "Aye. Got word this morning. The peacock scarves were custom-made for Grayson last year, a dozen of them, for his research group. He handed them out to students and assistants, Blake, Henshaw, a few others. The one around Grayson's neck was his own, kept in the study. Blake's story checks out there. Poirot nodded, his mind turning. Bon, and the library porter? Did he confirm Blake's absence? Japp flipped a page. He did. No sign of Blake between 9 and 10. The lad's garden story holds up. Constable Reed found a cigarette stub in the bushes behind Grayson's house. Matches the brand Blake smokes. No one else saw him, though. Précisément, Poirot said, stopping his pacing. The garden, it is where Blake gathered his courage, or perhaps his desperation. But the manuscript. Let us return to Mademoiselle Henshaw. She claims she delivered De Rotis Cyphris at 8, yet Blake could not find it. I propose a hypothesis. The manuscript was never in the library. Clara, perhaps, withheld it, or it was a pretext to enter the study. Japp's eyes widened. You're saying she lied? Why? Poirot's smile was faint. Not lied, perhaps, but concealed. She admired Grayson, oui, but admiration can mask ambition. Suppose she saw the cipher, recognized its value, and sought to protect it, or herself. The cog in the library closet, it is too convenient. Was it dropped by Blake, or placed to mislead? Japp leaned forward, his skepticism fading. You want to question her again? No, Poirot said, raising a hand. The evidence against Blake is complete, but we must confirm the manuscript's fate. Send Reed to the library to search for De Rotis Cyphris. If it is there, Clara's story holds. If not, she has more to tell. Japp scribbled a note, then paused. And the cipher? You're sure it's thief? No chance it says something else? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The cipher? It is clear when aligned with the clockwork grid at 9:17. Grayson's notebook confirms it. A Polybius square, modified by gear positions. But let us test one final detail. He produced a sketch of the grid, tracing the coordinates with a pencil. The numbers 3, 9, 1, 4 point to gear positions, the letters to their values. At 9:17, the gears align to spell thief. But if we adjust for a different hour, say 9:00, when Clara was in the study, the result is help. Japp's jaw dropped. Help? You mean Grayson wrote 2 messages? No, Poirot said, his voice low. 1 message, with 2 faces. Grayson, in his final moments, wrote a cipher that could accuse or plead, depending on the key. Blake, the thief, saw it as an accusation. But Clara, if she saw it at 8, might have read a cry for aid. She left at 9, claiming illness. Was it fear? Japp shook his head. You're tying yourself in knots, Poirot. Blake confessed. The timer's his, the cog's his, the motive's his. Oui, Poirot agreed, but the heart of a crime is never simple. Clara's role, it is peripheral, yet her cog, her scarf, they linger. Let us be thorough. He paused, his gaze distant. The final piece, it is this. Grayson's cipher was his legacy, a warning to protect his work. Blake, in his greed, destroyed it. The scarf, the timer, the cog, they are the tools of his betrayal. Japp sighed, closing his notebook. You've got it all, then. Blake's for the gallows, and Grayson's ciphers solved. Anything else? Poirot's smile was melancholy. Only this, mon ami. The tragedy of genius undone by envy. Blake's ambition was his ruin, and Grayson's brilliance his death warrant. The little grey cells, they have spoken. As they stepped into the street, the Oxford bells tolled 10, their chimes swallowed by the morning fog. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mind at last at peace. The cipher's truth was laid bare, the clockwork's secret revealed, and the final piece, Blake's confession, tied to the scarf and the cog, had completed the puzzle. Yet, as he walked into the mist, a faint shadow lingered, a whisper that Clara's truth, though not criminal, was not fully told. But that, Poirot decided, was a mystery for another day.